my name is Bryce Gaton. I work as EV Choice, although that's one of my many hats, as Riz has pointed out. I'll try and keep to, I've got about 10, 15 minutes to talk. Fine. Planning an EV transition is part of the stuff that we've been doing. I've been working in conjunction with other consultancies. The IST there, a number of you will have actually met me through the transition plans we've done for probably 20 odd councils through Melbourne at the moment and regional Victoria. Done a number of plans over the last few years for transition planning for your fleets, and that's also for public charging as well. We've been doing a number of reports recently. Worked with Urbis Consulting with their EV Ready developments, which I think is behind the New South Wales document at the moment. That was 2 years ago now. Do a lots of EV talks. In fact, did a webinar for Bass Coast last night and a number of them around. So a lot of public EV education. That's sort of where I come from in the background. I'm actually a science teacher by training and a trade teacher by background. So it's a long story there. And that's part of what I do with the Melbourne Uni Formula Race FSA race team is I do their safety training and supervision. And I do that for a number of unis. And a whole lot of other stuff, right for the driven, as Riz has said. So that's sort of my general background. I also like to throw that slide in to say EVs are not a new thing. That's a 1906 electric vehicle. Third of all vehicles sold in the early 1900s were electric cars. And that's third of them were roughly steam cars, external combustion, and the internal combustion, the petrol car, basically was the one that won as a result of you could get petrol outside of the main CBDs of the world, the central business districts, and electricity couldn't, because that's where electricity was confined in those days. We forget how quickly electricity has rolled out through basically 1 century. So what I'm going to talk about today is planning a fleet transition and how to sort of get the basics of it going before you get in people to help you do it. So part of it is you need to refuel EVs at the driver's home and via simple AC driving. EVs can refuel on site or at the owner's home. You don't have to go out of your way to refuel them. So it's a big mental shift there. When the car's sitting there doing nothing, that's when the car refuels, not going out of your way during the trip or having to park at the depot and stand there waiting for it. DC charging is not a one-to-one swap. 95% of charging is done when the car's in downtime. So DC charging doesn't replace petrol stations. So you don't have to always replace every petrol station with a DC charger or your Bowsers at your depots. You may require far fewer. So beware of that and don't try and replace everything from a charging standpoint. Okay, we've always used Bowsers, we'll put in DC chargers, replace every one of them, or always need to find DC charging somewhere around the place. Refueling, you have a lot of procedures around that as far as fuel cards, cost reimbursements, whatever. Don't forget to do the same thing for EV charging. It's a new ball game for refueling. Your systems will need to reflect that, and there'll be a number of people here that are starting to work out systems for that. Get talking. People hate uncommunicated change. As I should have said at the start of this, Dan pretty much took half of my presentation and presented it to you already, because the learnings are, if you don't communicate, they'll deliberately leave the cars uncharged. They will start spreading EV misinformation, even disinformation, because they don't like change and are trying to fight it. So if you take your people with you, that will make a big difference. As I said, don't reinvent the wheel. Many organisations have been there before, and the whole point is, don't try and start from scratch all the time. Talk to people. This is one of the events of today. Yesterday, or actually a couple of days ago, was an event that Kingston organised. It was really good at getting the charge point operators, the consultants, lots of different people, the EV council, all together in the same room and just talk. And that was a really good idea. Share experiences. MAV, the LGA from New South Wales, the Local Government Information Unit. I think I got the lettering. It should be LG, lowercase u. They'll probably shoot me for that one. Australian Fleet Managers Association. All of those are putting out lots of information, lots of events, talking to each other. Make sure you turn up. Obviously, I'm talking to the converted because you're here today. For larger fleets and organisations with larger and multiple sites, you may need to get in help. Just double check that they have actually got experience in that. Plan for it. What's the old saying? If you fail to plan, you've planned to fail. Make a plan. Assess your real vehicle needs. This is a really good time. A lot of councils have fleets of vehicles that historically it's leased vehicles to the staff as part of a salary perk. Do they need to go? And some of the councils are actually using a transition to finally kill that model off. Other councils think it's a good idea, want to keep it. This is something to look at. Same again for buying four-wheel drives and big SUVs and four-wheel drive utes. Now, do you really need the number of them you have? A lot of councils do need it. A lot of those cars just get driven back and forth as commuter vehicles. Now, it might be a good time. I drove here in my old Mitsubishi i-MiEV rather than my Kona today because my little i-MiEV does a more efficient job of getting around and U-turns and what have you. Look to overseas trends and experience. We are way behind in the EV transition uptake, even though we're hitting close to 10% now. Overseas, Europe is 1 in 4 cars, nearly 25% is a plug-in electric vehicle. They've had lots of experiences of things going wrong. Let's try not to repeat their mistakes. In England, for instance, they brought in legislation recently for the apps for phones for DC chargers. They're really annoying here in Australia. We have multiple apps, and those multiple apps, we have to keep pulling them up and getting the right one. We have to enter our credit card details. In England, they must put a credit card reader on the charger. They must be interoperable on chargers. That sort of legislation is coming. Those are the sort of things that will happen here in a couple of years' time. So follow those trends and keep an eye out. Talk to your planners and see what they're doing. Key point when it comes to EV charging is, as we've all found, the DNSPs are really slow in getting around to providing the power supply. So get in, assess your charging needs, and look at what the charging needs for the 100% fleet will be, and plan for that as it's coming along. So if you've got an 18-month, 2-year timeline, start getting the paperwork in early. Talk to the right people in the DNSPs. Kingston, I'll take my hat off, they brought them into the room, and we could talk to them, and we could start making contacts with people we can talk to directly. Carefully select your EV charging sites. It's the sort of things that we've done for councils, and we'll go around and look at the car parks and what have you, and just talk about the considerations and the criteria to use. So this is sort of a distillation of that. Store mostly AC chargers. DC charging is not required as a one-to-one replacement. So most of your charging will be AC. Where possible, place them as close as you can to the point of supply. Obviously, channeling under a car park costs money. The further you go, for the voltage drop as well, so you need bigger cables, etc., etc. May not be practical, but where you can, do so. So even if it's a really nice looking spot over there, could it be moved up closer? Wherever possible, position chargers to reach multiple points. If you've got 2 rows of parallel parking where they all face nose to nose, and you can back in as well, you can put the charger in the middle of every 4 chargers, and the lead can be swapped around. People can back in or drive in. It's a really good way of setting up your charging, that you can swap the leads around. And my recommendation, as to a lot of councils, is 1 charger per 4 EVs is more than enough for your fleet. That's AC. Revamping a parking area, remember to throw some conduits in. A number of times we were called in to evaluate a site. I'm getting a nod from there. You can see all this lovely new conduit, lovely new bitumen. You're going, I've allowed for car charging now. You've got us down to talk about it, and going, no. Okay, it was going to be a few channels dug up. Now, when you're thinking of putting it, just part of your planning process, remember car charging. And part of it is developing a staged plan, including for charging. Now, passenger segment, if you're staging your transition, passenger cars are pretty much, all the segments are available. Prices are not quite there, but certainly the segments are, the range is there. Like commercial vehicles, excluding utes, we've got 14 now. We'll have 16 more, not just 16 by the end of the year, we'll have 16 more by the end of the year, so 30 like commercial vehicle options. So your light commercial vehicles, excluding the utes, can start flowing into your fleets in the next 12, 18 months. Utes, 1 to 2 years away. By the end of next year, we'll probably have half a dozen. And that's when you can start looking at your Ford Rangers and what have you, your Hiluxes as replacements. Medium trucks, up to about 16 tonne, 4.5 to 16 tonne. They're coming in the next 3 to 5 years. There are some available already now. The heavy trucks, there's a number available. I actually drove a 16 tonne Scania truck last year, and there's more of them coming in. So that's the sort of transition plan. Over 10 years, you should be able to get your whole fleet to 100%. Try before you buy. We've got all the fleets out here today. Talk to them. Fleet, especially, they're trying to get a feel for how the fleets are used in Australian conditions. They're going to be very willing to lend you some cars. Don't be afraid to ask. And they might have some long-term loans, cheap deals. I know there's been a number of things with Aussie Post done. Spread your first purchases across several models and types. Don't sort of buy all BYDs and replace that segment. Spread it around, get some learnings going. Staff familiarisation process to smooth that transition, get the cars slowly flowing into the fleet. Use initial experience to spotlight potential issues. So as I said, bring them in different parts. Try one SUV, try one passenger car, try small trucks. Just get a feel for what's happening. Point 5, include your staff in the journey. That's really important. Staff buy-in is really important to the implementation. EV familiarisation sessions, I've run a number of those for council staff and groups and different ways of doing it. There's talks about the fringe benefits tax and leasing and all that sort of stuff. Get people in to talk about them. For larger category EVs, so a light truck or a heavy truck licence, get in experienced drivers in them. Scania actually have a really good driver trainer with their electric trucks. He can come along and train your people into using them. What did I say? Yep. Point 6 is 7 points mainly. Continuous review and modify your plan is not to be set in concrete. It didn't come down from the mount on tablets. You will always be modifying. Things change. Policy changes. There's suddenly a grant scheme for for fleet charging during the day, workplace charging. Jump on it. You've got your plans in place for all your charging in future. Just implement it. Monitor new vehicle for options. As I said, 30 new passenger cars coming this year, on top of the 60 we already have, 16 more like commercials. Regularly review your total cost of ownership, as Dan said earlier. When that tipping point's reached, businesses in particular, it'll be almost a change overnight. Because anybody that keeps an internal combustion engine vehicle will in fact be a competitive disadvantage. Don't be afraid to speed up or slow down that transition. That's part of that planning, and keep it fluid. And the 7th and final point, be prepared for advancing technology. Here's a couple of ones coming. Smart chargers, grid management, they're coming very soon, where the grid can talk to the charger and say during the day, there's heaps and heaps of solar, let's turn on some EV chargers and get some soaking up. We don't want to overload the grid. Vehicle to building and vehicle to grid, next 12 to 18 months. The cars will start arriving soon with the capacity. The standards are changing later this year, and you'll be able to buy, as of right, the chargers from, say, Europe, and they'll start to be installed. And the grid management of it, maybe in 18 months or so. So behind the meter, vehicle to building, before the end of this year, quite likely. Vehicle to grid stuff, maybe the end of next year. They're the sort of things that are coming. Tariff structures are going to get more and more flexible, and you need to be keeping on top of those to get the best deals. Wireless charging, I get asked about a lot. It's coming. I'm saying it's not probably going to be all that big until there's potential disruptor of autonomous vehicles where a car can actually park itself over the charger. It's not that hard for us to plug a car in and unplug it. So wireless charging are quite expensive. So they're probably, this is my prediction, probably not going to be a big thing until autonomous vehicles come, and they might not be for 20 years. So disruptor, yes. Likely soon, no. Future-proofing, don't be afraid to wire for the higher power, even though you haven't got that capacity yet. You just put a smaller circuit breaker on it for the time being. At least the cabling's there, and you don't have to upgrade the cables. Data cabling and things, some wireless, some data. Throw in some data cabling now, you don't have to run those later. Multi-storey car parks, EV ready, you put in the subboards and the cabling and trays, and then put the chargers in as you go. So summing up, research, include learning from experience of others here and overseas. Do your research. Develop a staged and flexible plan. Get the next. Includes the ability to adapt to sudden changes in policy and incoming vehicles, whatever, or there's a supply shortage for a while. Changes in EV availability. There might be a whole pile of new models arrive. Keep abreast of it. Total cost of ownership, that will change very soon when it comes to commercial vehicles in particular. The LDV eDeliver 7, 60 grand plus your GST on roads. For some businesses, that will already tip over. Changes in technology, as I said. Assess your site electrical capacities early and have plans to identify the gaps at the right times. And include your staff. Really, really important. We don't want to be fighting them along the way. It shouldn't be. It's a better technology. It's a much cheaper to run technology, a much more reliable technology. We just need to bring people with us. I hear the story of when the horse and cart was being replaced by the petrol car, people were digging holes in roads to stop the petrol cars because they were so worried about them. And this presentation is, by the way, a summary of an article or series of articles I did for the local government information unit, the last one of which was last year, which is pretty much this presentation, and there's about a series of others that were written before about EV sort of 101. Information, those fact sheets, they are done. That's the summary page. All the Australian models, EV models in Australia, are updated every month with the summary pages, the battery size, their range, their on-the-road cost in Victoria. And for everyone that is available on the market now, there's a 2-page summary sheet with same headings, with the idea is you can compare cars. And that's aeva.au/fact sheets with a hyphen between the fact sheets. Find out more Australian websites, obviously The Driven, Riz and I write for them. The amusing part is probably 90-95% of our work is EV choice, 5% of that, 95% of people know me through the Driven, which is quite amusing. Electric Vehicle Council, that's the industry perspective, but they do some really good reports and papers, really worth keeping up with them. And my own website for put up articles that I write for The Driven and things on charging and what have you. I think that's my last slide. Forget that bit, they've taken out my burning questions at the end. It was mainly to say, if you've got any questions, keep them to the Q&A at the end. Thank you. Thank you for sorting the speaker.
Always. Thanks, Bryce.